I love that office. That's really cool with all of those cabinets.
I have my own very own museum.
It's nice.
Morning, everybody.
Hey, Dr. Joe.
Morning.
All right, we got a good chunk of our committee here.
Do we know if Tom is planning to attend since he's first on the agenda after introductions?
Yes, he did say he was going to attend today.
Okay.
So Art, I collected some earwigs. They're not the smallest earwigs. The what is
The
that?
minor earwig.
The minor earwig. Yeah, these are a little bit bigger. So I have no idea if they're anything common or not.
Well, you should check with your entomologist. Don't you have a guy on staff?
Hey, you're right.
I'm just a trustee. I don't know these bug things. It's all a mystery to me. That was a very cool find you had the other day, though, with the moths.
Yeah.
The bee moths. That was new to me. I had to track that down, and so I learned something new. Thanks.
Well, that mass that I found underneath the log must have been 50 individuals, and there are 3 more logs on the wood pile that are firmly attached.
Interesting.
So, I know it's this huge gregarious nature. Does anyone know a Jim Daniel? Does that ring any bells?
No.
Associated with, I mean, we have all the staffers here. We still have Roberto and Tom.
Does Jim Daniel want to get into the meeting?
Yes.
Is he a member of the public?
Well, we're broadcasting on YouTube.
Right.
So he might be, but that doesn't mean we're
I understand.
let anybody in. Let me reach out to Tom and Roberto.
Tom's here.
Okay.
Roberto's here too.
Okay. So Zach, don't let in Jim Daniel.
I suggest we go ahead and get started then, since the gang is all here. Anybody have any concerns about getting started? It's 9:01.
No.
All right. Everybody should have received the agenda and the strategic plan, which I think Joe just sent around this morning. I wanted to welcome everybody. It's been a long time since we met, and I really appreciate Tom's sort of prodding to get us together. I think it's an important committee. We have an important role. We have kind of a packed agenda. I'm hoping we can have a lot of discussion and not a lot of presentation. Having said that, to have a good discussion, I've asked Joe to give a couple of the presentations and Tom as well. So I'd like to welcome Roberto to the committee. Is there anybody else who's new on the committee that I may not be aware of?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, welcome, Roberto. That's all I had for a welcome. Tom, you had wanted to go over the committee guidance, so I put you first on the agenda. Would you like to sort of go over that with us and let us know what you would like for us to know about guidance to committees?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And the goal here is really just to be clear about what the committee's role is. And as you said, I think this committee is particularly important because as charged by the bylaws, you know, this committee is to plan and coordinate the long-term and immediate future goals for VMNH and to make recommendations, I would say, to the full board regarding that. And so the guidelines that I just put together were simply about how committees are formed, where the charges can be found in the bylaws, the membership, and it includes, you know, myself and Joe as ex officio on all committees. And then, of course, with our unique environment right now, being able to communicate and having to do so virtually, it's important that we make sure where we have 3 or more board members that we, announce that to the public, and that we schedule the meeting in advance so that the marketing and public relations director can arrange for that to be shared on Zoom. And so that's really all I had, unless there are particular questions about either the role or some of the things that I've mentioned briefly in terms of guidance. I would encourage you, I know you received it as chair of the committee, maybe to share it with the full committee, the guidance.
Joe, can you send that around to the full committee?
I'll do so.
Okay, I appreciate that. All right, thank you, Tom. Does anybody have any questions for Tom? All right, well, I love being ahead of time on the agenda. Woohoo, more time for discussion. All right, I think the first order of business is really for us to talk about the pandemic and how the museum has operated during the pandemic. I'm of the opinion we've operated pretty well, but I would love to know more about the details. I'm hoping Joe can provide that to us, and then we can have some discussion of whether we think there's anything else that should be done at this time. So Joe, take it away.
Okay, I'll just go briefly over these 4 bullet points and leave further points open for discussion. Research and collections is essentially unaffected overall. Now, that said, we have a full complement of staff on that side of the building. We do have some safety protocols in terms of numbers of people who can occupy a room and mask usage, sanitation, and all that. So I think they've been pretty disciplined with that. That being said, we do have a decrease in the numbers of visiting scientists. I'm not even sure that we've had many. However, I will just mention one positive is that during the pandemic, we hired part-time former Virginia Tech graduate student, Dr. Who did we hire?
Millipede guy. His name's on the
Yeah,
tip of my
millipede
tongue.
guy. Jackson Means. Sorry about
There you
that.
go. There you go.
Yeah. So Jackson is a millipede expert. So Cal was paying for him part-time, but since we're not going to do a full search for Jim Beard's successor during a pandemic, we've decided to delay that by a year. So we're going to be using that savings in salary money to bring on Jackson full-time until such a point that Jim's successor comes on board. So he'll be working in the millipede collection. For those of you unfamiliar with that collection, it's one of the top collections of this institution, and it's one of the top millipede collections in the world. So Richard Hoffman, the late Richard Hoffman, did all the work on that essentially, along with some research associates. But it's good to see that collection continue. Speaking of the curators in general, as you might imagine, their public interactions and their conferences and so forth are all virtual. So there have been some changes in their day-to-day, but as far as them still being productive and so forth, that's really largely untouched. Education and outreach, that is, we see a lot of ingenuity there. There were no summer camps, there are no school visits, there are no outreach opportunities. Teachers, frankly said, from our discussions with the community, teachers who are teaching online really are not even interested in delving into distance learning opportunities because they're so overwhelmed, which includes trying to fit the new format into their day-to-day, as well as they're having a lot more electronic communication from students that to deal with. So we're pretty far down on their list of priorities right now. So we are prepping. So the staff right now is already prepping for summer in case that we do have the opportunity to safely run summer camps. If not, we'll pick that format up and move it to 2022. That said, they're also going to put into the queue distance learning based teacher professional development for next summer. So we're just going to have to see what the landscape looks like, but they're going to be prepared to go either direction depending upon what the situation allows. They've been doing a lot of online content to try to stay relevant. And they've also been kind of cross-training in other areas of the museum, say working with research and collections and some other areas of the museum to basically use this as a time of professional development for themselves. For hours, for public hours and safety protocols, frankly said, we've always lamented the idea that our geographic location has caused us to not have the attendance that we would have if we were located, say, in a Greensboro or Roanoke. Right now, it's an asset. In fact, I'm going to give Ryan 1 minute just to walk through the demographics. But we've been open. We were open Friday through Sunday through the summer. And then when the summer concluded, as we have traditionally seen, Sundays drop off after school starts. So from an operational standpoint, operation costs versus benefit, we just decided to drop Sundays. We're open Friday and Saturday now. So Ryan, would you walk through that demographics sheet that you produced from the advancement report, please?
Sure. Thank you. So we've seen quite a bit of shift in the sort of the zip code distribution. Normally we get about 30% of our visitors from Martinsville, Henry County. We actually had 12% from Martinsville, Henry County, 3% from Danville, Pittsylvania County, which is fairly normal. Other parts of Virginia were 22%, North Carolina 12%, and then very surprisingly, visitors from other states other than North Carolina and Virginia were 50% of our visitation.
Wow.
And that's
normally.
That's for the fiscal year, right? So far.
That's for the first quarter. Sorry, that's for July through September. Gotcha. That number is normally closer to 2 to 3%. We are going to look more in depth at that to see if there's any correlation possibly with different states' policies on shutdown and visitor restrictions. Although the other states are just across the board. It's, folks from New York, New Hampshire, southern states like South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee. So it's really all over the place as far as, which states. But yeah, we're at 50% of folks outside Virginia and North Carolina.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So the safety protocols are exactly what you would expect. Since we don't have a lot of people, we don't have big crowds to contend with. We're obviously not throwing our festivals. The next festival we're planning right now, and we've charged the staff to prepare for this, is Dragon Fest for 2021. That's October, so a year from now. The one after that will be Dinosaur Fest in January of 2022. So we'll keep our finger on the pulse of the pandemic and ensure that that is feasible, but that's just what we're prepping for right now. Continued safety measures are in place. We keep hand sanitizer all around the gallery. We've removed some of the hands-on interactives to prevent any kind of spread through touch. All visitors are required to wear masks. We're at well over 90% compliance. We have a few medical situations where people are asking if it's okay they go without mask. The front desk does just ask them politely, make sure to consider other visitors and to provide some distance. And then we've also invested in some additional cleaning materials and equipment such as foggers and so forth, so we can clean areas more efficiently, both from a time standpoint and apparently from an efficacy standpoint as far as increasing our ability to clean a surface. So, all right. I don't know what's going on with my computer. I've got a Vita message coming up. So if something happens, it's out of my control. Okay, great. Okay, so the future plans and anticipation, I've kind of covered most of that. Our educators are prepping for next year, starting with the summer. Research and collections is pretty much business as usual. Public hours, when things, we're just watching the trends. If it looks like we get to a point where we can open back to 6 days a week and we feel as though it is financially okay to do that. Right now, our analysis is such that if we open 5 days a week, the Monday through Thursday, will not add greatly to our visitation, but will come at a cost in terms of increased utilities, increased staffing, and so forth. So those are the kind of the main points of our operation right now. So Tom, I see you got a message here. You've been good. We've got your whole presentation and whatnot. So you've been in good shape despite your technological glitch there. So Lisa, I'll turn it back over to you to guide any discussion or commentary.
Yeah, I had a few questions I'll get started with, and then if others can chime in as they have anything. I guess, Joe, the education and outreach, people not relying on you all makes total sense. I think a number of the teachers are overwhelmed. I had a question about whether that's affecting our revenues. And then I had a second question. Is there anything you need from the board, from the trustees that could help you with anything related to the pandemic? Is there anything we can do to help? So those are my first two questions.
Yeah, as for the first question, definitely. The revenues are reduced and we do use those revenues to pay for educators. However, we are pursuing a couple of other opportunities. So Boxley, for instance, and Ryan can give some further details. He's just submitted the proposal or is in the process of submitting the proposal. They're going to fund some further online content. So that's going to help offset some of the lost revenue. So they'll be working more strongly on this online content brought to you by Boxley. Furthermore, we just received a gift a couple of days ago that's going to go towards education activities from one of our kind of longtime supporters, Adrian Hermes. And those two gifts together will take a chunk of the loss away from education. So we'll be looking at other opportunities along the lines as well. So Ryan, I don't know if you want to mention anything, just a couple of the quick specifics about what the educators will be doing with Boxley's funding.
Yeah. So the really exciting thing is this builds on the gift we received last year from Boxley. So that was more for physical in-person outreach education in areas of Boxley operation. And so because they were very pleased with that and happy with the results, they're very interested in how can we turn that program into a totally virtual program. And they're very open to different audiences. So we're going to look at not only school audiences, fully recognizing that teachers are kind of overwhelmed at this point, but also just general public. So they're interested in partnering both with educators, but also the research staff to support their online programming to reach different audiences. We're also in talks with Carter Bank and Trust. So they had given a gift previously for part of their package was sponsorship of the Dragon Festival, which of course Joe mentioned is of course canceled. So they're very interested in how can they support virtual programming as well. So we're trying to tailor these different packages to fit sort of their needs, but obviously our mission as well.
And
Right.
they were the ones who initiated the contact. I'm sorry, not the contact, but they initiated the discussion of virtual content because they did notice very strongly some of the programming we've already done, such as Adam's Tales of Ancient Life and Ben in Nature and other online programs as well. As far as what the board can help with, frankly said, it boils down to the simple things. So various board members from both boards had provided some videos from our upcoming membership push. We're just about ready for that. That should be coming out later this month, Ryan. I think he said, yup.
Yeah, we're going to launch our new website shortly. And with that is going to be the launch of that campaign.
And on your own social media, I mean, even if you go on to our page and share material so people know that we're open, I think that would help. And if we begin to see an increase at any point in the density of visitation on Friday, Saturday, we can consider opening either back up on open back up on Sunday or open on Thursday. So, right now I've asked individual board members to help with specific projects and so forth. Lisa, I'm sorry to overall say what you can do unless you're all going to start writing checks for our educators, right?
Right.
Yeah. It's, we're very fortunate, being a relatively small agency, our budget has not yet been impacted. I'll ask Jonathan to to cover what little he's heard from Richmond. But so far so good. I mean, it's almost like we're going into hibernation almost. Not quite. We've been active in a variety of areas, but as far as our public engagement and our public visitation, that's just going to probably have to wait until things are a bit safer. So Jonathan, what have you heard out of Richmond?
So far out of Richmond, our 01 budget seems to be fine. Nothing's been touched there. Also, the language, the language for Waynesboro is still in the budget. So moving forward, that's about as good as news as we can have. According to the budget analyst, everything is still up in the air and could change. But it's been through all the committees, and I think this is the end result will be really close to what they have right now and what they put forward. So it's looking good.
All right.
Good.
Thank you. Thanks.
I
And
have-
when,
Go ahead.
no, I was just going to ask, when do we know what the end result is? I know that there was some mention that after the special session, they were going to look at it in December again. And I just don't know, when do we think we're going to have a kind of
Well,
end result this week?
There is a rule. It's 6 weeks after it comes out of committee that they can vote on it, but I believe they'll just push until in the spring, and they'll look at it then. They're going to wait and see about tax revenues coming in through Black Friday and sales and through the end of the year.
I mean,
That makes sense. Thanks.
I totally see them doing that. I mean, it's going to be, this is all leading so close to the 2021 General Assembly session that it just makes sense that they're going to kick that can down the road.
I have another question, but maybe we should see if anybody else has any before I jump back in with another question. Does any other members of the committee have any questions about the pandemic?
I do. Joe, I'm glad to hear that you were able to bring on Jackson using the unused geology funds. Is there an opportunity there to use those portion of those funds for other positions, or expanding part-time positions, or augmenting technician positions during the interim?
Yeah, I'll answer that in part. We're wanting to be a little conservative here. We did just hire Hayden, brought him on board. So he's now working. We did hire a full-time, primarily archaeology technician in support of his program. We haven't written the EWP yet. It's going to be something like 80% archaeological support. The person we've hired, she has a PhD. I'm sorry, she is all but dissertation, should have her PhD before the end of the year. No, and she should have her PhD in the spring, if I recall. Nonetheless, we're going to charge 20% of her time, so about a day a week, working in the other collections where she'll get some guidance on what to do. So we're thinking that might be a way that we keep the geology collection active. There are still parts of it that need cataloging and so forth, but then where necessary, she can get her time can get divided amongst other areas where, say, there's a strong push and so forth. So that combination of two hires exceeds what we were saving when Dr. Moore departed for Richmond. So so to bring Jackson on board full time, plus the little bit extra spending we're putting into archaeology, it's a little bit tight as far as I'm concerned. Jonathan, I don't know if you have any.
I understood that Jackson's position was based in part on Jim Beard's former position.
Yes.
Did I misunderstand that?
Right, but we're spending more in archaeology now, so
that's
money
okay.
over to
All right.
archaeology.
Correct.
So,
Understood.
yeah, right.
But Jim was a 30+ year position, so I'm not saying that that's a huge pot of cash, but it's substantial. So is there any advantage to just holding on to that? I mean, it's in the budget for this year. Either use it or lose it.
Well, we're using part of that to pay for the added position within archaeology. So certainly Hayden does not have the paycheck that Dr. Moore had.
I understand that, but what I'm hearing is that there is no additional cash lying around from that salary that could potentially augment another position in some way.
I think it's too tight, but we can do a.
Okay. No, I'm not suggesting you do. I'm just curious.
Mm-hmm. Jonathan, do you have any further details on how close that budget is?
Yes. So it's about 40% out of going to Cal, and then another 30 going to Hayden. Just talking vagaries. That way we don't talk salary numbers.
Sure.
The benefits at the state are amazing, and a lot of the extra cash is eaten up by that.
Okay.
There may be enough for 500 hours for somebody, an hourly worker, to help on a project, but we'd have to be really strategic.
Right.
with those funds.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Roberto or anybody else, did you have any questions before I ask my next one?
Yeah, just a quick one, because we were bringing up the fact about the teachers going crazy, but I'm assuming the parents are going crazy too, looking for things to get out of the house and do something with the kids. And I think the dinosaur drive-bys, selling out is an example of that. So I'm just curious if the inverse of rather than people coming to the museum coming to people, what options might be there, like the dinosaur drive-by or something at an open mall. I don't know how many malls are open these days or anything, but things where the museum is coming to them as opposed to, them coming to the museum. And just an overall, it's an overall question of mine, not specific to the pandemic, but just in general, how do we get out there? And I'm sure it'll come up in the other conversations.
Yeah, I think we have a pretty good model. So we're talking about what we do next. What do we have? And I think it'd be nice to do something here in Martinsville before the cold weather sets in for obvious reasons. We also have, I'm sorry, I don't remember what staffer brought it up to me, but Tom, JMU had already inquired about us running something up in Harrisonburg. So so we'll see what we can fit in here, in the autumn before the cold weather sets in. But we'll also start planning to do just that, Roberta, to get further out into the public, whether it's Martinsville, Waynesboro, or other cities. The dinosaur experience is probably the most complex because we have big, heavy fossils and other large things. Like there's a couple of casts. I think we brought out either 2 or 3 of the very large casts that we have, very large skulls, and they were a hit. But it really wasn't that bad. We just loaded up the box truck and were able to go and set up. Well, it only took maybe an hour or 2 to load up the box truck, travel time, and then a couple hours to set up and then execute. So it seems to be a model that we're kind of honing a bit. So yeah, I think it's a good idea to continue that model.
Well, I'm glad to hear that JMU followed up, because there was a lot of excitement about it when I mentioned it at an outreach meeting. And I think it might have been Melissa Heatwall that reached out to Christy about it, because I mentioned that would probably be the best way to go. And then I agree. I think this is a model that we could expand. And even if it's revenue neutral, it just gets the word out about what the museum can offer. And I know that you did it for free. I don't think there would be any problem charging people, $5 a car or something like that, just to help both establish their commitment to coming, which is something that happened in Waynesboro, and then also, maybe offset a little bit of the expense.
Yeah, we actually, it's not that big of a difference for the 3 shows that we've run so far if we had charged $5 a car versus donations. So Ryan, could you just walk through the numbers? So we had a pretty good idea that we had to do time ticketing about 20 cars per hour. That is reasonable. So over a 5-hour period, as you could do the quick math, that's $500 that we would max out for offsetting costs. So Ryan, how are our numbers?
Yeah, so for Waynesboro, we had 61 cars, 235 visitors in those cars, and we brought in just over $390. So it actually came out to about just over $7 per car. That was comparable in comparison. Over the 2 we did in Martinsville, it was just over $4 per car. So, I mean, not a huge difference, but very strong sort of donations for that. A lot more $20 bills than I expected to see.
Yeah.
Which is good.
Yeah, and the only thing, the one drawback, and we went into this, we weren't blind to it, but when you have free ticketing, it's so easy for people to basically say, geez, I have 2 competing opportunities. Well, the free one, I'm not losing anything. And so they just don't go, which is too bad, because that would have been another 30 people who could have gotten tickets who missed out. So let's see here. Roberto commented that that this kind of activity drives donation behavior, and I couldn't agree more. So Yeah, so we'll keep in touch about what's next on the calendar for reach out to the community.
So I have a big picture question. This is Lisa again. We are finding, like I think many companies, that there are a number of things we've done during the pandemic that we want to keep doing post-pandemic. For example, we just did our big innovation expo online. We had speakers online and panels online. And normally we can only invite a certain number of employees due to limited space, but because it was virtual for the whole company, we had substantially increased attendance. So I guess I'm wondering, big picture question, are there things we've been doing during the pandemic that we want to keep doing post-pandemic that have really worked well? Have we sat down and brainstormed about that and thought about that? I know we're still in the middle of it, but I think that's an important question to kind of ask. What have we done? Is it these drive-by things? Is it something else? Or are there things we've done that are really working that we're not going to want to quit post-pandemic?
Well, when I look at the composition of the Strategic Planning Committee, I see that every member is quite a distance from Martinsville. So I wouldn't mind hearing your perspective before staff simply jump in to answer Lisa's question.
I think meeting remote is great. I can say other people have different ideas, I'm sure, miss the social aspects of it, but for board business, I think we're likely to get more participation over time if we do this on a regular basis. We may not have that option, but I prefer this. I miss going to the museum, but you know, I'm not in a position to do a 7-hour drive in one day because I'm not quite ready to check into a hotel yet. And sitting at a meeting for 6 hours, I'm not ready to drive home either. So that's just my little tiny perspective. But I think taking advantage of Zoom for any kind of communications, whether it be public programs or board business, foundation business, I think is a good development.
I'd have to look, but I do believe we have $4,000 annually dedicated to offsetting the costs of board meetings, mainly travel, accommodations, and what per diem. So not only that, but there is a budgetary thought to it as well. It's small, but you know, we can do a lot with $4,000.
Yep. Perhaps if we have this option, just speaking about ourselves, you know, maybe we can certainly plan on having an annual meeting, and where we get together if possible. But the rest of the time, we plan on meetings like this. And again, it might open up some new opportunities, but I know that a lot of people look forward to the social interactions before, in between, and after. So that's a consideration too.
Okay, thank you.
I agree with everything Art said. And my question would be, who do we advocate to about, you know, being able to continue this after COVID hopefully goes away?
Well, under what statutes do we have, is this suddenly an option? I know that you, in your emails, Tom, you've mentioned that, you know, under emergency, whatever, we continue to do this. What is that emergency? Who is it issued by? You know, that would be the starting place. I always thought that we could have done this all along. We just chose to meet in person. I didn't realize we were mandated somewhere.
Well, I think it's because of the emergency declaration that the governor has made. And I don't know whether if that goes away or when that goes away, whether we lose the option. So that's an open question. I really don't know the answer to it.
Well, our legal counsel could probably answer that question very quickly in the interim.
I think Roberto has his hand up.
Yeah. I remember from being on another similar board that there are provisions for people, the farthest away people, in other words, as long as there is the main location somewhere where the quorum somewhat is met at that physical location, and the other locations are publicly announced beforehand, you know, for whatever reasons, like, you know, we had someone that was out in the southwest corner of the state, and it would take her literally a day to get back and forth, and she'd have to stay over. So she occasionally phoned in, and that was allowed, or if you had a family emergency. So it's all in the FOIA statutes, more or less, and that seems to drive the forced physical meeting thing. But that's been getting relaxed, you know, over the years, and this probably tipped it all the way over. So yeah, I would think legal counsel would know the most up to date, requirements, but there were provisions for the farthest folks to kind of call in.
Well, I do recall that in I think it was the bylaws, there were provisions for calling in. And as I recall, they were limited. The conditions in which someone could do that were limited. So, that may be the initial foundation for how we've met in the past. But it would be worth pursuing and checking with council and seeing if we have any options, because I think it would create some additional opportunities for us as a board.
Joe, can you take that as an action item to check with council and then let us know?
Lisa, as chair of strategic planning, would you like me to CC you on that communication to Audrey?
Yes, or I can ask her, either one. I just want to make sure we follow up. Yes, thank you.
I'll initiate it and we'll just see where it goes from there.
All right. I was beyond committee meetings. Is there anything we're doing for the public? Anything we're doing at the museum, the touch-free kind of stuff? Is there anything we want to continue or invest more money in?
I'd like to just put a plug in for the Friday webinars and things like that, following on my theme of going out there to the public and driving some exposure behavior. Because I think, as you mentioned, there's probably other people in the state that are too far away to just go down there, even if it's for a few hours. So this stuff of getting the museum out there and exposed will help in raising the picture and knowledge of the museum, considering the very limited marketing budget that exists anyway. So that would be my plug.
Yeah, I agree with that, Roberto. I also think the Ben in Nature social media posts have been very effective. So I would hope that we would continue with things like that, because it does take, you get a sense of the museum without having to come to the museum. And I know we need the money of people actually coming to the museum, but I think that is all marketing.
When you look at our revenue over the last few years pre-pandemic, a lion's share of our revenue was coming from our festivals. So under normal conditions, we would still want to be open and we would still let people come through and we'll still get that revenue. But moving more towards that kind of punctuated visitation does free staff time up, and talking to people like Adam and the educators and Ben, they do want to continue this. And so we actually just invested in Ben, and this can also be something that eventually benefits other areas of the museum, but we did buy him a telephoto lens to help with grabbing images and so forth. So that's a bit of museum equipment that can go to other folks as well.
Good. All right. I don't want to get us off schedule, but I also don't want to cut off debate. Is there anything else anybody had on this one before we move on to diversity?
Yes. One more thing is that if we do decide to carry on some of these online programs or expand the programs, I think we should consider a tiered system where some programs are available only to members. And that way it drives up membership, or potentially would encourage people to become members of the museum, because then they would have access to select programs, happy hour with a curator, or a field experience or something like that. And, I'm all for more discussion at another time and how that tiered system would work. But I think we should somehow figure out a way of promoting membership to the museum rather than focusing just on people through the door or through the parking lot. We need to consider other avenues as well.
Yeah, like you said, I'd be happy to give further details, but I think our new website and the interdigitization of different...
Everybody's frozen on my screen.
Pardon me?
I think I can still hear you, Joe. Art, are you there?
I'm here, but everybody's frozen on my screen. They're wiggling now.
Okay.
Well, anyway, I think we have new capabilities coming up to do exactly what Art says. So we'll definitely look into that.
Okay, I think that's going to be important. I think there are going to be all sorts of lessons learned from the pandemic. All right, so it sounds to me like we have 2 action items coming out of this. One, to get with council and follow up on what the process is for virtual committee meetings, what is and isn't allowed, and decide whether or not we can do something virtual. And then really to think about post-pandemic continuing strategically some of the Friday webinars, taking the museum out to the public, been in nature, etc. So I think that's a good outcome of our discussion. All right, so switching to our next topic, which is diversity. I don't think we have talked about this a great deal. I know as a strategy committee, I'm not even sure about the full board. So I'm looking forward, Joe, to hearing what diversity initiatives the museum has in place, and then to a discussion with the committee about, what we might do to further those. So I think the floor is yours.
Okay, just so that you know, in terms of my leadership team, it is 6 staffers plus a curator. The curator rotates each meeting. But as far as the 6 people on the leadership team, we have 4 males, 1 is African American, and 2 females. As far as our managers, that is people who directly supervise other staffers. We have 16, and that is evenly split between males and females, and 1 of the males is African American. So from a male-female standpoint, it's pretty solid. And as far as our recent hires in our professional positions, such as research and collections, are in the last little more than a year, it's been 2 males and 1 female hire, so as evenly split as it can be. As far as African American applicants, the lion's share of our folks who are not of European descent are all within maintenance and what we call museum technicians. We used to call them security guards, but they get broader training now. They do more at the museum. Frankly said, for our professional positions, educators, which we haven't hired one in a while, they're all on staff now are veterans to some degree, and folks in the scientific areas, we just don't get many, if any, applicants of other people of other from other cultures. So bluntly put, I wouldn't say that we have an initiative. We follow the data. We report that data annually to Richmond. But as far as any kind of push to specifically hunt down, so to speak, applicants of that would increase the diversity of our staff, we don't have any current initiative.
Okay, are there any initiatives for the public or any initiatives for with the schools based on diversity? Is it just staffing that initiatives that sort of is the focus of what you're doing right now?
Well, no, not exactly. I hadn't really, when I thought diversity initiatives, I thought it was more aimed at the staff here. As far as who we serve, we do reach out very strongly to our communities that have a vast majority of the children on free or reduced cost lunches. We also have an EBT card program. So if you present an EBT card, you and your family can get into the museum for $1 each. So that's a 90% reduction, 80% reduction for children. So I think from that standpoint, we've actually done pretty well. And when you, I mean, this is qualitative, but when you see the school children come through the front door, it's a broad array of folks. We're not just getting privileged schools in. And a lot of that does have to do with money that we've gotten through donors and so forth. So from the foundation that provides scholarships, and Christy does a good job of reaching out to schools to let them know that these scholarship dollars are available. Jonathan, Ryan, am I missing anything that you would like to highlight in terms of our outreach to other communities? All right, okay. Jonathan?
No, I think there's an effort underway, I believe, to get some material translated. I know I've worked with Haley Richardson. She's an ESL teacher, and we're trying to get some signage done there. I just mentioned it to her, so that's all I have to add to it.
You're talking about Spanish language material?
Yes, yes. She also has a small background in, I guess, Mandarin, but the discussions are preliminary at this point. So we're just trying to open it up to different ideas and then see what she can focus on in her off time, which is, again, limited because of the pandemic and her work virtually.
But she is a good local resource.
Do we keep metrics for the diversity of our visitors?
No, I can't think of any situation where we've tried to measure diversity. I think we just simply take zip code numbers and we get members versus non-members and people 18 and above versus 17 and younger.
And geography, right? And geography.
Zip codes, yes.
Yep.
I can jump in on this one.
Please, Roberto.
I've been thinking about it. I was probably going to bring it up in the marketing side when we talked about the development plan, because if we do have the zip codes and we bang those up against the census data, then we can go down one level further and at least from the zip codes, see what the demographic breakouts are of those zip codes. And even if just the footprint that the museum covers, obviously it covers the whole state, but from a visitation standpoint, A, and then from an addressable footprint, B, of where, we can realistically expect people to come and visit or get involved. We could have those numbers broken out, even if we just kind of put it up against the census data. So we would know county, city, et cetera, what those demographic breakouts are. And in that area, then obviously in your JMU between there and the places we're looking at, I'd probably say Spanish is probably the second most prevalent language, which means either through volunteers or students or people like that, that could be brought in to help, translate some of these simple things. I'd say that's the next addressable community, because I think if we stick to the umbrella of a museum for all of Virginia, that will keep you away from any, reactionary words from some of the less enlightened folks within the state. So if we're going to fully address every citizen of the state, then going down one or two of those levels would at least show that we've thought about it and have done what we can to do what we can with what we have.
Thank you. Roberta, if it's okay with you, I'm going to ask Ryan, because Ryan and Zach tend to be the ones that kind of keep those data and do the data analysis. If we'll have a quick internal discussion in short order, if they could work directly with you, just in terms of keeping you in the loop. So if you see an area in which you can guide their efforts that we haven't thought of, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, that's no problem. That's something I'm hoping to contribute to the table here.
I think, Joe, that reporting back to the board, and I hope Tom is still on, but I think reporting back to the board on what we're doing on diversity, on your staffing efforts, on our education efforts, because I know you didn't think of it immediately, but what we do with low-income school outreach, the EBT card program, I think those are important. And then hopefully we can also have the results of the analysis you're going to do of the zip code data. And I think this getting signs translated is a really good idea. I mean, I think Mandarin would be amazing, but I think Spanish is essential. So I hope that we can pursue that a little bit further. It sounds like it's in the early stages, but I do think that goes toward a museum for all. Did anybody else have any questions or thoughts
Yeah, I do. I'm still on the call, and I'm glad you brought up our educational programs because there's a wealth of data too about the schools that's available through the Department of Education about their school populations. And so if we're serving a school in Henry County, let's say, we can look up a lot about the the percentage of people of color, the socioeconomic status of those students, the number of free and reduced lunch population, and all of that stuff is available very easily from the Department of Education. I've used it myself because I serve in an underserved community at the Waynesboro High School. And so I know a lot about the statistics that are available from that. So like Roberto was suggesting, mining the zip code data, I think you could mine that school data as well.
I think we do that to a certain degree. So Jonathan, I think you have some stats that you worked with Christy to obtain.
Oh, just the Martinsville numbers. The demographics here, it's 75% minority. So we're serving all those school children through education and the free tours, as well as the virtual learning.
Right. Sorry, Jonathan. I'll have to double check, Tom, but I think Christy does grab data that she keeps handy for grant proposals and so forth from the school data on free and reduced lunches, as well as school diversity. But I'll have to check on that.
I think our location gives us an advantage too. Speaking to the, I guess, more rural areas of Virginia, and I think it bodes well for us pursuing the Waynesboro as well, just to hit the lower income individuals who may not be able to travel as far to get an enriching experience at a museum. I think it's awesome what we're doing. So.
I absolutely agree with that, and I think we should, make that publicly available, that people know where this agency is serving a diverse community, and we can work on the efforts of our staff and how diverse our staff is. But I think we're already doing a lot with regard to serving a diverse community between Martinsville and the local counties, and if we're thinking about expanding our reach into Waynesboro.
Well, frankly said, since we're in pandemic conditions and, we're not flailing our arms trying to find work for the educators to do by any means, but this might be a good time that we actually look at our past data and include that. And I'm afraid we just lost Lisa. So Zach, if you just keep an eye out for her, I'm sure she'll dial back in. So Art, I guess you're senior on the strategic planning committee. So if you would take over, or if you'd like me to.
No, I'm not shy. Unless Lisa comes back and has another idea, I suggest we move on to the next plan, which is the strategic plan. Joe, it looks like you're up again.
Well, let me make one more plug, please.
Oh, pardon me. I'm sorry.
And this is probably a longer range thing, but I'm wondering within the terms of internships. I don't know how many internships are done during the year, and now I've even seen a lot of organizations doing virtual internships. So I don't know if this is something we could bump up to the foundation to potentially fund, but I'm thinking then, if you had a couple of bilingual interns, you'd literally have in-house resources to do some of these translations. Oh, looks like we may have Lisa. Lisa, are you back?
Yes, I asked a question and then dropped off. Sorry about that. We lost power and it somehow affected my phone, which is plugged up. So
I was trying to brainstorm a little bit and make a longer term suggestion of potential internships for students of bilingual students or students of color that would be a resource, an internal resource for the museum, and maybe something we could bump up to the foundation to see if they could fund a little bit, because obviously, working free on top of having to pay for student credits is like a double whammy for some folks of lower income. So if there's something, at least the foundation or somewhat, we could kick in, you'd have people who would be on hand, bilingual, as well as when things open up, a face they might recognize, but just something long-term to potentially think about. And even now there's a lot of organizations that are having virtual interns help out with stuff. So just an idea for future thought.
I will tell you that that is one of the things Dominion is doing to drive our diverse hires, and it has been working incredibly well. I just participated last week in our annual diverse student, I forget what they call it. It's like an expo. They bring a bunch of very qualified diverse students together, bring them to Dominion. Of course, this year it was virtual, and teach them about Dominion, spend a lot of time with them, and then we offer them all jobs. I mean, I think there are a few we didn't offer jobs, but mostly we offer them jobs and as interns. And then those internships, assuming they do a good job, almost always turn into job offers. So I think starting with interns and for diverse students is a great way to go. I will say in my career, I come from a low income family. And while I may not be diverse, without those paid internships, I wouldn't be where I am today. So I think starting with young people with internships is an amazing idea from personal experience and professional experience lately in terms of it working.
Sorry, Roberta.
2 internships in 17 years through AT&T. So I'm another poster child.
Yep.
Ryan had commented to everyone that funding from grants, corporate partnerships are need-based. So I think we do have opportunity to maybe even make that. When we reach out to corporate partners, we go through the effort, and when we started doing this years back, it greatly increased the number of corporate partners we have, but we give them a menu. We find out what excites them, what do they like. And I'm sure we can get some traction if we target certain corporate partners for internships for English second language folks. And I can easily see, that's a great idea, Roberta. The wheels are already churning here, that we can supply information to them virtually through, say, a virtual tour of a gallery with the current text or the current audio that we're giving. And that could be their internship, to do that interpretation. And then work with Jessica with proofreading and voiceovers and the whole 9 yards. So I think that's something that Ryan and I can work on with the corporate partnership pitch. And then lastly, Zach sent to me kindly, with the new website, again, we're going to have a new homepage that has a dashboard, and we can list any stats that we want. So we can highlight diversity stats on that dashboard if desired. So after the launch, I would hope the strategic planning committee will look at it and see if there are ways in which we can enhance our kind of outreach in terms of who we're serving and, the importance of what we're doing to underrepresented communities.
If I can,
go ahead, Roberto.
I was just going to say, you've reminded me about the corporate angle. I mean, another potential hook for them would be if they have employee resource groups. I don't know if Dominion has them, but I know AT&T and a lot of other companies do. And the employee resource groups are always looking for volunteer projects. So literally you could have corporate professionals, bilingual and, multicultural and whatnot, as a hook for the corporate partner. If that's something that they're into, could get them involved, and all of a sudden you'd have money and additional volunteers. So just something we can talk about later. I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, I'll just follow up on that, Roberto, to say that we do have employee resource groups. I think we have like 18 of them at this point. And we do have one group that is working with organizations across Virginia, translating things, including some of Dominion's things. So you do have built-in employee resource groups at many corporations that can help with a lot of diversity efforts for sure. And I think, Joe, to your point, I think adding this to our dashboard or website is a good idea. All right, I'm sorry I dropped off right when I had asked you to commit to a report back to the board. Did you agree to do that? Did Tom think it was a good idea?
Let me see here. I've got it in my notes and I've already lost it. I think we did agree to that did we, Tom?
Yeah, regarding the electronic communication, is that what we're talking about?
No, this is
Oh, okay.
at the next board meeting, have Joe give a report, a little report, or it can be from the strategy committee, either way, talking about what the
Yeah, I got it
museum
here.
is
Yeah,
doing on
report back to the
diversity.
board, diversity.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think
I have it
I
down
think
that
it's an
we-
excellent idea. As I said, I think we need to out this information and share it. And I think we probably have a good story to tell in terms of the population that we serve.
Okay, so Joe, I can give that report as part of the strategy committee, or you can give that report on behalf of the strategy committee. But I think having the board know what we're doing on diversity is important. And I think following up on some of these ideas, like the diversity internships, is important as well.
Okay, I have that in the notes here. What makes sense to me operationally is that it doesn't sound like, from what I'm learning here with the new system that we have, that Ryan could augment the advancement report, but that doesn't mean that he has to report it, Lisa. I think it should come from the strategic planning committee, but that's where the numbers would live.
That's fine. I think having it in the advancement report every meeting is really important. And I'm happy to talk about it at the meeting on behalf of the committee.
Thank you.
All right, anything else on diversity? I tell you, you guys are amazing. We're right on schedule with our little agenda here. Anything else on diversity before we move on to the strategic plan? All right, well, we put the strategic plan on the agenda because obviously we're the strategy committee. But with everything that's happening with COVID and you know, and Waynesboro and all that, I just think it's worth having Joe remind us what's in the strategic plan, and then brainstorming a little bit about it and whether it's still what should be in our strategic plan, whether there are any tweaks to it, etc. So I think the floor is yours, Joe, to just remind us what's in the strategic plan, walk us through it, talk us through it.
Yeah, I'll just go real quick through the 7 points. But before I do that, I think it is good. I mean, strategic plans are not meant to get dusty. I mean, this one is only 5 months old. And it is a fluid document, not that we meant it to be, but we're just reacting to the current conditions. The VM&H research centers, we have the Center for Biodiversity, Colonial and Pre-Colonial History, and Earth Sciences and Ancient Life. I would like to leave these flexible, and I will just point out that with the hire of Dr. Bassett in archaeology, I don't know how much we've had a chance to talk about this. I know I've talked to some of you individually, but Hayden is technically a member of the U.S. Army Reserves, and he is an officer with the Army Monument Innovation Laboratories. So this is the group, you probably heard about them through popular culture as the Monument Men of World War II. Well, the Army has seen fit to fund pretty heavily efforts that originated through the Smithsonian in collaboration with the Department of Defense to map out with geospatial software areas of global conflict that contain cultural heritage sites that could be endangered. Also areas that could be endangered due to climate change, such as increased storms, rising sea levels, and so forth. So this is also a fast reaction group. They could be called up at any point to go to a site to help the local folks conserve their sites. And Hayden is actually already readily involved with a group of Department of Defense officials and soldiers who will be deployed to Djibouti in East Africa, which has a bunch of cultural heritage sites. And so he will be giving them recommendations and training online on how to best manage those sites while meeting the mission of the Department of Defense. So that being said, we're going to convert the distance learning lab, which is a visible lab. And Christy, this was Christy's idea, you know, so she's volunteering it because she can now do distance learning in the gallery. She doesn't need an actual lab. So we're going to redeploy those bits of equipment in distance learning lab. And we're already moving that. We're going to create our own Army Monument Innovation Lab there. It will be publicly visible. We've got permission from the Department of Defense, and we are sharing back and forth a draft MOU with them to create an official relationship. So once we have a draft that we're both satisfied with, we'll share with Audrey and then share with the board. But that said, we're going to be allowing different Department of Defense officials to periodically come through, and they're going to be paying for everything. Department of Defense will supply all of the computer equipment and whatnot. They just ask to be able to tap into our fiber optic network, which Martinsville, of all things, actually has quite excellent fiber optic capabilities within the city. The whole reason I'm going through this is not to belabor the point here, but since Hayden will be very strongly involved in that, as part of his day-to-day mission, we may want to, instead of looking at the Center for Colonial and Pre-Colonial History, just simply have the kind of archaeological and cultural heritage efforts of the museum fall within the Department of Archaeology and the Army Monument Innovation Lab. So we can open that up for discussion and so forth. That said, my goal here was just to inform you that this is something we would approach you with, that it's not what we had dreamed up a year ago or more when Dr. Moore wanted to have the Center for Zooarchaeology. Hayden is very good at zooarchaeology, but it's not what he's focusing on. And I would like to kind of roll that way, roll with his strengths and the programs that he's building here. So Lisa, would you like me to continue on with the other points or open up any discussion with that part of the strategic plan?
I would go ahead, Joe, but focus just like you just did on things we may want to talk about, because if we start talking about that one, it could take the rest of the time. So I would go ahead and get through the plan.
Yeah. Okay. So point 2 is the Gene S. Adams Education Pavilion. The architects are securing a contractor, and right now we have a proposed opening of spring 2021. We could probably do it sooner, but no sense in opening an outdoor facility in the dead of winter. So that's where we're going right now, timeline wise. Of course, when that's completed, we would move on to part 3 and start to look towards creating a roadmap to establish a canopy walk and that physical connection to J. Frank Wilson Park. I'm going to skip over to part 5, the rehab of Douglas Avenue. We do have a roofing contractor in place. I don't have a timeline on hand, but in the relatively near future, the roofing contractor who's paid for through maintenance reserve will have the roof completed. And then after that, we're going to look at the next priority area, which will probably be upgrade to the HVAC system over there. Whole point is to create an expansion of our collections capability. And so that way we can move some materials over there for long-term storage, but we want to do so only when the climate conditions in that building are appropriate for collections. Related to that, point 4, the creation of an early childhood learning center, which we would rename strategically, but that's just the placeholder name. That is the movement of the physical library to Douglas Avenue, again, when the environment is appropriate, and then opening up that space to create a interactive gallery specifically for K through 5. So that point is going to be dependent on the completion of our efforts to rehab Douglas Avenue. The establishment branch of VMH at the Shenandoah National Park, that is the campus, VMH campus, that's the way I should have worded that. We've already talked about in that it's being delayed as a capital project, but between the Wayne Theater Lecture Series, the Drive-Through Dinosaur show, and our social media and so forth, we're trying to keep our connections very strong there, so that remains not on a back burner by any means. And then lastly, all of this is going to lead up towards attaining reaccreditation through the American Alliance of Museums in 2025. I think I have a date of January 2023 as a suggested date with the Board of Trustees to create an ad hoc reaccreditation committee. And at that point, that will involve members of the Foundation Board of Directors, the Board of Trustees, and staff, which will basically quarterback us through that rather intensive process. I'll just say that we'll have a bit of an advantage in that I've been regularly conducting reaccreditation visits for AAM over the last 6-7 years. And I've been invited to do a virtual one in March with the Columbia Gorge Museum and Visitor Center. So point is I get to read a lot of these reaccreditation submissions, as well as write the recommendation to AAM. So hopefully I'll have a bit of institutional knowledge that will help us move that process forward pretty smoothly. So I think we sit in as good a shape as we can. We've got some opportunities. And, you know, as you might recall, our consultant, Dr. Chesbro, was always quick to point out that strategic plans were not meant to be a hard and fast document, but a guiding star for us, our progress forward. So I think we're already seeing that only 5 months into the plan because of not only just COVID from a not so great standpoint, but also opportunities such as what we see with Dr. Bassett. So Lisa, I'll turn it back over to you for discussion.
So you had a bullet when I asked you to add the strategic plan to the agenda. You added a bullet that said challenges after your overview. I'm just wondering if you see any challenges and you want to talk about that before we get to board discussion, or if that was just for discussion purposes.
Yeah, it was more for discussion purposes. Though that said, you know, the 30,000 foot challenge is just COVID. So, you know, the reason the pavilion is taking so long is because it's you know, it starts with you know, our interactions in Richmond. There's a lot that was delayed because of that. You know, and that being said, we're not trying to make any excuses here, but you know, the COVID situation just does kind of it makes operating a museum like we're walking through wet cement. It just seems to be a grind.
Right.
So I don't really have anything substantial to say about that.
Okay. All right. So discussion. I'm guessing Art may have input on the name change to the one center, but anybody, any questions, discussion of any of the items on the strategic plan?
Well, if no one else is jumping in, that Army Men project that you're talking about, considering the amount of military in the state, I mean, I think there's some hay to be made there. And to Art's comment about member, I mean, I could even see like a 15-minute overview video of or webinar on what they're all about and informing people that could then, after the members see it, be put up live. But I'm just, that's like not something, you know, anybody who saw the movie and has any kind of interest, along with the military population of the state, I think there's some hay to be made there. I don't know what it would look like, but I think there's some hay to be made there.
I do agree with you. The point of contact with DOD, I think, is willing to help with that, because we already talked with them about, you know, okay, if we're going to enter an MOU, we want something out of this, right? We're not specifically asking them, you know, to fund some aspect of the museum, but we want to, as you say, we want to make something out of this for us. So they have agreed. The distance learning studio, as it stands now, does have shades. They can be pulled down if there's anything sensitive. And computer monitors, when they're doing their geospatial analysis, those can also be tilted in such a way that the public doesn't see them. But they agree that some of that work would be certain kinds of progress and so forth. That said, I think he is also a point of contact. How do we get our message out to both the active and the retired military community that we have in Virginia? Frankly said, a very new audience for us.
I'll be honest with you. I mean, I hate to use such a colloquial term, but it's just a no-brainer to me. I mean, we are a very military state. A lot of our leadership, political and otherwise, has a military background. I think there's plus North Carolina has some of that. I think there's a real opportunity to draw visitors, draw from a broader, different geography. I think there's a real opportunity here, and I'm glad that you're jumping on it. Anybody else have any comments or questions about the strategic plan? I have a question about the canopy walk. I think the last time we talked about it, Joe, there was some coordination that needed to be done with Martinsville and the park and others. Is that coordination and those discussions taking place already?
Yeah, and I'm going to let Jonathan fill in on any of the details, but we have already provided a white paper to the city. I'm not saying that things look like they're going to move at lightning speed, but basically we're describing what our programming is and what would it continue to be and how would it grow in Wilson Park. So Jonathan, please feel free to add in any further details. He's been kind of our point of contact. He serves on our planning commission here locally, so he's been a great point of contact with city leadership.
Yeah, so discussions have gone well. COVID obviously has slowed it down. Several of the employees at the city are looking at it now as I guess COVID, they've had, working through COVID, I think is put a grind on them, and they're all looking, some of them are looking at retirement, but they all look at this as a potential legacy project for them. So there's a couple of key people that we're working with, and they're fully behind it. Whether, I don't know what the deal looks like, whether it's a capital lease or a gift or some other detail yet to be nailed out. But post-COVID, I think things will really, there'll be meetings and there'll be walkthroughs, and I think it's a positive movement. Just, I keep getting told after COVID.
So as I said, the completion of the canopy walk will be that initiative to begin to look at the roadmap. So that means the first thing we're going to do is make sure we find out where the landmines are. So we want to work with the state of Virginia to find out exactly what we need to do in terms of public safety, access, egress, all this kind of stuff before we make any promises about what this would look like. It's completely doable. It's just that there's considerations, on the practical side of doing a capital project with Richmond. So we would want to do that first while we're working with the city, because the city, as Jonathan said, looks at this as some kind of potential legacy project. Then I would like to take that information, and I've already started a conversation. I don't know how available he'll be, but I did start a conversation with an architect. And he was happy to have some free of charge phone calls so I could bend his ear. But he's the architect that designed the canopy walk up at the Wilds in the Adirondacks. So if you look at the Wilds website, they've got, I'm envisioning something different. I think what we have, what we're looking at right now is something a little bit different, but it shows the success of such a project, what it can do for an area in terms of transforming it. And its ability to connect people directly to nature in a controlled fashion, rather than like put muck boots on someone and say go stroll off into the woods, right? Some of the people who don't want to do that can go into nature in a very controlled fashion, in a safe fashion, and a unique way using a canopy walk. So that's what the initial steps will look like beginning at some point next year.
Are you referring to the Wild Center in the Adirondacks? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, it's either the Wilds or the Wild Center.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fantastic facility. It's an unbelievable facility. And I visited it and think of it as a model of what we could add as components to the Branch Museum in Waynesboro, because it has a lot of water connections to it. But I'm interested to hear that there's actually this connection as well.
And you are correct, Tom. That is the Wild Center. Yes.
Yeah, I just Googled it, and it's quite interesting. I see a picture of a fake bird's nest with somebody sitting in it on top of the forest, but also the canopy walk itself. I mean, it's very spectacular. So,
they do a great job highlighting the wetlands too in the area. And actually, one of the things that I really remember was one of their windows was about halfway deep into the wetland, and so you're looking from inside to the outside, and you're looking at a wetland, but you're also looking underwater.
Pretty cool.
I can make a plug and a question.
Yeah.
Plug number one, I'm looking at the website as well. Back to the diversity checklist. This is something that would allow accessibility for all the people in wheelchairs and other things that can't access the rough and ready nature walks. This looks like it probably has some access for wheelchairs and whatnot for people that obviously can't do the hard treks. So
yeah, we've actually talked about that a lot, Roberto, with the elevation of the floor of the park and the back porch. Essentially, we can have ADA accessible angles of access to that canopy walk. So definitely 100%.
The only other question, and this is probably, I'll try to make it a yes or no because I don't know the details, but I'm just wondering, the availability of contractors and their hunger for work, if the COVID has actually given them more work or they're starving for work. Because if they're starving for work, there could be some deals to be had for things that we're going to need anyway. So that I don't know the details. I'm just throwing that out there in case you've already looked at it.
Yeah, Jonathan?
We've certainly heard that there's several companies out there that are hungry for work. And then I think with the I don't want to say too much live on YouTube, but I think things are looking good for us to get a reasonable price deal on the project.
And just as curiosity, we've gotten we regularly get contacted, especially for VMNH Waynesboro, from engineering and other firms, just wondering about progress. Can we tell you a little bit about our company and all that kind of stuff? So Jonathan and I have worked to try to accommodate them and provide them information on our progress, as well as in some cases sitting down on the Zoom with them where they talk about the projects they've worked on in the past.
Has
Go ahead, Art.
if you're still talking about the canopy, go ahead. I'll wrap it up.
I was just going to say, it's still Googling the Wild Walk. There's an article by Travel and Leisure magazine, which just shows the potential for, that kind of thing, I think, to bring a regional or national attention to the museum. Go ahead, Art.
Has a start date been set for the roofing work at the Douglas Avenue facility?
Not that I'm aware of yet.
Okay, so a contractor's just in place, but there's no schedule for work yet?
Well, I know he had to go and take cores of the existing roof. So those have to be looked at in some way. I don't really know exactly what they do with that kind of information, but let's just say that we don't have a scheduled date when a whole army of people will descend on Douglas Avenue and get to work. Okay. I know some of the preliminary work's already underway.
Okay. And at the very beginning, Joe, you had mentioned the renaming of the research center to reflect the new direction. And I think it's perfectly legitimate that the curators who are in those research centers identify themselves and their efforts as they see fit. Those were just working titles, either based on a vacuum or what had been done in the past. So I for one, fully support them calling themselves whatever they want to call themselves. But I think it's good that we have those research centers identified so we can include that in the strategic plan and also use it to sell the museum and promote the research that's going on there.
Yes, thank you, Art. Appreciate that.
All right. So with that, anything else on the strategic plan? Okay. All right. So we have a few minutes for open discussion. Are there any items that weren't on the agenda? Any items you want on the next strategy committee agenda? Anything we should talk about we didn't talk about?
Let me just mention one thing I've been thinking about, and maybe it does reach back to the strategic plan, is we now have a year of experience under the Secretary of Education as opposed to the Secretary of Natural Resources. And it's an open question to me. Are there things strategically that become available to us or are more potentially valuable as we serve the Secretary of Education as opposed to Secretary of Natural Resources? And I only bring this up in one way because I've formed a new committee, this University Partnerships Committee. Maybe there's more opportunities to work within that secretariat to build bridges across to, K-12 institutions and public universities, community colleges. And so I just want to throw that out there as a thought.
Anybody?
I will just say broadly, just to start any discussion, that the difference between working in education and working in natural resources is I just think education has more resources available. So I've learned not to hesitate to ask, because kind of the culture in natural resources was, everything's underfunded. So, try not to ask for anything, and, I got that, we wanted to be a team player. But in education, I think just because it's a larger secretariat, we as a group should not hesitate to, ask for big picture things, full well knowing we can't get everything we want, but that, we should go ahead and make requests when we have something we need.
Yeah, and I know when when the governor announced that we were going to do this, there was some trepidation and people were a little nervous. What does this mean for the museum? But I looking back now a year in history, I think it's been a good thing for us. And so I just want to recognize that and keep thinking about how we can, take advantage of maybe the more resources that are out there and potentially more partnerships that are available through that secretary.
The only thing that I have in the back of my mind, I'm going back to internships, and I'm forgetting what the exact word is when you take an internship as a craft person. I'm like a guild. I'm forgetting the word. It's just not coming to me.
Apprenticeship.
Yeah, apprenticeship. So there's a number of programs in the state they're going the other way in terms of people taking on industrial type of trade craft things that seems to be coming back. And I don't know what degree programs are throughout the state where there could be people who could get some kind of practical apprenticeship through the museum, with the museum, in some of these degree programs, and at the same time give us some labor.
I mean, that would be great for our exhibits as well as general museum maintenance. We do send our maintenance staff to workshops, so that way they are more in tune, with the equipment that they work with and so forth. But if somebody were to come and do a type of apprenticeship here, I think that's a great idea. I'd love to learn more if anybody happens to stumble across a contact for that, or even with exhibit production.
I keep seeing I'm on the governor's PR release thing, and every now and then over the last few years, I've seen companies having these kinds of things announced, and I think there was even some money allotted from some governor's budget to spur these programs on with corporations. So, I don't know how much money's out there, but I would think somebody within the educational hierarchy must be the lead for these corporate educational partnership things.
Anything else that we should talk about? All right, well, if people have thoughts on ideas for the next strategy meeting, thoughts on how this one went and how we could do it better or differently, let me know. Meanwhile, Joe, I'll send you some very rough notes I took during the call.
Okay.
And we'll get notes out to the committee. And it sounds like we have some recommendations and items for the board, which I think is what you were hoping for, Tom. So
Yes,
anybody
absolutely.
have any?
Yeah, very good
Anybody-
meeting. Great meeting.
Okay.
The only closing thought I had, as I was curious, being new to all the committees, is I know Tom had been trying to cajole some of the committees into action, and I'm wondering what the up and down cycle is, so to speak. So if this committee does the big picture thing, are the things that go down to some of the other committees for better execution, and likewise things that get developed in the other committees that bubble up to being considered for the strategic plan, that kind of up and down thing? Because if some of the committees are saying they don't know what to talk about, and we have an actual strategic plan, I would think some things bubble down. Just asking.
I can give you one example, Roberto. You know, I'm on the facilities committee and then also arts collections committee, but just using the facilities committee as an example, we had a committee meeting recently where we talked about the details of contracts and ordering a new elevator and elevator parts. So, I mean, it was very much a detailed kind of version of the high level discussion we just had about Waynesboro. And you know, and the maintenance for our existing buildings. So some of the committees do get down into some weeds, but they're important weeds. I don't know if that's helpful or if anybody has anything else to say to follow up.
Well, I just think that to underscore Lisa's point, I think that facilities committee was good because the reason we even brought that up, I mean, we knew what needed to be done and we knew what was going to happen, whether we were going to continue to repair the elevator or to replace it. But it was a significant alteration in budget. And so that's what the board is for, to look at such things. So partly, in a very small way to answer part of your question, Roberto, you know, the board is there for strategy and direction, to hire and fire me, and to look at budgetary items. And so I think that was just a really good example of, you know, we had a staff level question or, you know, concern that bounced to the board very appropriately. We discussed it, they voted on it, we went ahead and executed. So that's kind of an up and down kind of cycle, though, between staff and a committee, as opposed to, I think what you're talking about is that since we have, this is big picture stuff, some of this I think could, and I can communicate with some of the other board chairs and communicate, copy Tom on such things. But I think some of this does go to some of the other committees, such as Waynesboro Advocacy, maybe even we do have a finance and marketing committee coming up. This might be something that they tackle as well.
Yeah, just trying to plug Lisa's prior questions on how can we help. So we're here, use us.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, just a short thing. I mean, the way I see communication happening, certainly the committees will report out at the quarterly meeting. So we'll hear to the full board, and then other committee chairs are obviously there in the room. So they may take that back to their committee particular ways. But I also see Joe's role as an ex officio member of all committees to try to help, you know, if there's issues that cross committees, to try to facilitate communication between board meetings, and myself as well. So I've been participating in a number of the committee meetings. And like Lisa said, they get involved in specifics. The Education and Public Programs Committee got down to some very specific stuff. So it's a good question.
I will say that I
I
think an important area, I'm sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say, I think an important area for us to try to get back to the other committees as they meet is this discussion of diversity. I don't think we've had a lot of discussion about diversity. And I think reporting it out to the board will be helpful, but it can come up in all sorts of the committee meetings, right? I mean, so I think having that discussion at each of the committee, maybe not facilities, but maybe, who knows, diverse contractors, right? We have a big diverse contractor push at Dominion. But I think taking that discussion on diversity down to some of the other committees is important, because I don't think we've done a lot of that before.
Since you're talking about it, Lisa, we do provide a SWAM report, small women and minority run businesses. So we report our usage of those, and we do have goals that we attempt to reach. And I think every year we've exceeded, especially small businesses. But nonetheless, if the board is interested in that, we can report. We already do the report.
I think you should include that in your report back to the board on diversity. That's one thing you're doing. Diverse suppliers, diverse employees, engagement with the diverse community. I think it all counts. So I think you should include that in your report back to the board.
Okay, that's Jonathan's staff that do that. So I'll have them communicate with Ryan, and then Ryan can just insert it into the advancement report as well. I just, again, as far as a place for it to live, I think that's an appropriate location.
Okay, good committee meeting, good participation. Anybody have anything else they want to say before we close? All right. Well, I really appreciate everybody's time. I'm sorry we went a few minutes long. Everybody have a good weekend. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, you too.